Okay, today I am going to show you guys how I use white, and this is the Prismacolor colored pencils that I use. And typically when I start using white, I do all the lightest areas in my drawing. So I'll go ahead and start working on that. I actually have Euromastix lizard in this particular drawing. But typically what I do is I start on all the lightest areas. Some of the highlights will also be used just to kind of get them in there before you go in with the rest of your colors. And this is kind of just as a general guide when you do go in with the white pencil to kind of get most of your lights, or highlights rather, to get them in there before you go over with any darker colors, because then you can't really go back sometimes. It's a lot harder to get those colors back in there when you've already gone over with much darker colors. And as usual, many lizards actually have more of a cream color on the bottom of their bellies. So kind of, it's the same way for this particular Euromastix that I'm using as reference. But this is a good way to kind of establish where your lighter colors are going to be, so that when you do go on with the rest of your colors, you don't overdo anything. And then maybe just put a hint on the tail for some of the textures going on in there. They're also called the spiny tail lizard, as it so happens. But the name most often heard in the hobby anyway is Euromastix. It's an interesting name. And I also have some plants in here as well. I have some succulent plants and a desert rose, which is basically because it's in a desert. These are desert animals, so I figured I would add something like that there. It's very good when you're doing a lot of these reptiles and stuff to kind of add some of the natural flora that is common around where they come from. It's really a good opportunity to kind of get your skills on doing some of that as well, not just the reptile itself. And this is also Meten's paper. I forget what this color is called, but I believe it's some kind of one of the lighter earth tones. This is really good paper to work with if you like working on colored pencil, and using colored paper. It's very good for this medium. Really brings out a lot of nice qualities in the performance of these pencils, so I definitely recommend it. I actually have done it in one of my reviews. There's a lot of nice skin folds in these Uromastic lizards also, which is also another good skill to pick up when you're dealing with reptile skin. Some of them have actually quite a lot of folds. You'll see this on bearded dragons as well sometimes, like on their sides. I'm just getting in a little bit of that. And these lizards actually like it hotter than bearded dragons do. And I'm going to go ahead and start working on some of the plant structures. I think this is Echeveria, it's like the little hen and chicks succulent. And there are tons of them all over the world, and they have bred them to be so many different things, colors and shapes. So, I mean, the one that I'm using is actually going to be more of a purple color once it's done. I'm just putting in some highlights now. And then my face, which is in the center. There is also one more way that I use white that's not having to do with highlights. Sometimes you can actually use white to soften up a color or blend it even. I will show that in another video, but for right now the general purpose of white when I go in is usually for highlights or establishing lighter areas on whatever I'm working on. So that's the general rule. I mean, that's kind of what it's used for most of the time, unless you have something that is specifically white, like the white of the eye, or like the the little spot of reflection in the eye, or an object that actually has white coloring, something like that. But other than that, it's mainly a highlighting tool. And with these little plants here, they are kind of tricky. You almost lose your place when you start to go and do the highlights on them, because there's so many different little petals. I'm not sure that I'd call them petals, but I don't know what they call these things. I know there's a term for it, but the little leaflet type things, they're so tightly packed most of the time that it's kind of funny how the light will shine on some of them and then others it will be completely blocked. So I'm just kind of lightly doing the edges of most of them, and then as I get toward the other side I'm kind of not doing it as much, because there'll probably be some light that won't hit those areas. I apologize if I keep moving the page here, but it keeps slipping off the board that I have it on. But in general, you don't have to do anything major. It's mainly just outlining and just adding small touches of doing the highlights, and then you can go back later and kind of refine that with some of your other colors, and then if need be you can actually add more of the white. And with the, let's see, the desert rose, it's not actually a rose, but the flower itself actually has a lot of white in the center of the petals there. That's one case of using white because something is actually white, not a highlight. So those you can actually kind of go in for what I'm using them for. And just kind of, not too hard, but low pressure, just adding where the white areas are going to be and just sort of leaving like a mid-tone pressure, I would say, for now, and then later on you can go back and you know, put a little more pressure and really saturate more of the color there, if that's what you need to do. These petals actually have a central line in them too, which is interesting. I haven't seen that on many flowers before. Learn something new every day. And they're really, really vibrant pink too. Really nice color. It's kind of surprising. A lot of desert plants are that way. And I'm leaving a blank space where that indent is, just so that I can come back to it and make sure that all my areas are covered, and I can kind of account for the color that's there, further, you know, saturate it if I need to, add shadow where it needs to be. So a lot of with white, a lot of it is a lot of subtlety really when you first begin it. You don't have to go in full pressure and you know, push all the way down to where it's like stark white. It's mostly about subtlety. You're just going to add little hints of what you're going to need later on, and then go in and touch on that and find out which of your base colors work. Get those down, and then go in and finish off your highlights and your final touches, and then that's generally how you follow one of these particular drawings. At least, you know, it's kind of how I approach things, and how I've done it. Usually you go in first with your shadows, although sometimes you can start with your highlights as well, which was what I'm kind of doing today. You can either go in with your highlights or shadows first, get those sorted out first, and then start with your base colors, get those down, and then final touches, and then you're done. So, I mean, it all depends on the complexity of the work that you're doing, obviously, but again, it's not a huge deal to not, you know, to be kind of careful at this stage and just put in some subtle hints of what you need, and then, you know, establish what you need more in the base tones and base colors, and then go from there. You know, it's not a problem to do that. Now, in this particular one, I have a human face, so I'm going to get a little bit of highlighting in there, just to kind of outline a little. I'm not going to do a whole lot again. Now with the hair, you can do a little bit more because there's going to be some definite hair shine, all depending on where you want your light source to be coming from. And with this, you can kind of just do, Jesus, I can't speak today. You can do just strokes there like that, and it kind of adds a hint of the strands of hair and the highlights in them. It's a nice kind of way to do hair or fur. It's a nice technique that I learned a while back. It's not very difficult, and you can kind of figure it out on your own if you really want to. And I actually have a braid, so I'll just do so that's how I pretty much approach using white in colored pencil. That's generally how I start an image. Either I'll start with indigo blue or white, as I'm doing in this case. That's the general usage of white and how I use it. And again, like I said before, unless something's actually going to be solid white, you don't necessarily have to use it for that. But it's a good option to kind of start your highlights. Thank you for watching.